Once upon a time, there was a country called Iran. It was not a perfect country. It had rulers, soldiers, prisons, slogans, missiles, secrets, and angry people inside its own streets. But it was still a country. It had children going to school, mothers cooking food, workers driving buses, old people buying bread, normal people trying to survive. Then, one morning, the sky opened. Not because those children had fired missiles. Not because those mothers had attacked anyone. Not because old men buying bread had declared war. But because powerful countries far away had decided that fear, suspicion, strategy, and control were enough to send fire from the sky. And that is where our story begins. Before the bombs came, there was an old box. Inside the box were years of anger. There was the 1953 coup, when Iranians remembered foreign power interfering in their politics. There was the 1979 revolution, when Iran turned against the US and Israel. There was the long nuclear argument. There were sanctions. There were threats. There were assassinations. There were cyber attacks. There were proxy wars. The US and Israel said Iran was dangerous. Iran said the US and Israel were bullies. Both sides kept adding stones into the same box. And every time someone asked, "Why is the box so heavy?" the powerful people answered, "Because the other side started it." But ordinary people did not care who had the better excuse. They only saw the box fall on their homes. The word that kept returning was nuclear. The US and Israel said Iran might one day build a nuclear weapon. Iran said its nuclear program was peaceful. But in politics, sometimes the word might becomes a weapon by itself. Might can become sanctions. Might can become threats. Might can become airstrikes. To Israel, Iran's nuclear program looked like a future nightmare. To Iran, US and Israeli threats looked like proof that it needed strength to survive. And to the people watching from below, the argument sounded like this: one side said, "We bomb because we are afraid." The other side said, "We build because we are afraid." And the children asked, "Why does everyone's fear fall on us?" Then came June 2025. Israel struck Iran. It said the targets were nuclear sites, military bases, missile systems, commanders, and scientists. But bombs do not politely stop at military words. When bombs fall, they make windows explode. They make hospitals shake. They make parents run. They make people count names. Iran fired back with missiles and drones against Israel. For the first time, the shadow war became a direct war. Before this, the two enemies had often fought through other places, other groups, other skies. But now the fire had a straight line. Israel hit Iran, Iran hit Israel, and the map began to burn. Then the United States stepped deeper into the war. It struck Iranian nuclear facilities. To Washington, this was described as stopping a dangerous program. To Iran, and to many critics around the world, it looked like a superpower joining an attack on a sovereign country. This is where the story becomes ugly, because the US did not arrive like a neutral firefighter. It arrived with bombs. And when a giant enters a small room swinging a hammer, everyone inside the room becomes unsafe. Iran answered by firing at US-linked military targets in the region. The war was no longer only Israel and Iran. Now, the American military network across the Middle East was inside the story. After the June 2025 fighting, there was a ceasefire. But a ceasefire is not the same as peace. Peace means the fire is gone. A ceasefire sometimes means the fire is hiding under the floor. Iran had been hit, but not erased. Israel had shown power, but not gained safety. The US had damaged Iran's program, but not solved the conflict. Everyone said, "Stop shooting." But everyone also kept preparing for the next shooting. Iran dispersed equipment. Israel studied targets. The US kept pressure. Gulf countries watched nervously. Lebanon stayed tense. Oil markets stayed scared. The war took off its shoes and tiptoed into the next room. Then came February 28, 2026. The US and Israel launched a much larger attack on Iran. This was not a warning shot. This was a giant fist from the sky. Targets included military infrastructure, air defenses, missiles, command sites, and leadership. Iran's top leadership was hit. Many officials were killed. Civilians were also killed. The attackers gave their reasons: nuclear danger, missile danger, regional threat. But reasons are not the same as justice. A government can write a speech after the bombs. A child under rubble cannot write anything. And that is why many people saw this not as defense, but as a powerful attack dressed up in official language. One of the darkest parts of war is this: military targets do not live in empty cartoon boxes. They live near roads, schools, homes, workers, hospitals, and markets. When a strike hits a command site or base, the shock does not stop at the fence. This is how civilians become numbers. A girl's a school, a street, a bus, a family car, a worker's dormitory. In official statements, these things are called collateral damage. But no mother says, "My child became collateral damage." She says, "My child was killed." And if you want to understand why wars create hatred for generations, start there. Start with the words people use to hide the bodies. Iran then struck back. It did not only strike Israel. It fired missiles and drones toward U.S. bases and U.S.-linked sites across the Gulf. To Iran, the logic was simple. If American power comes from bases around us, then those bases are part of the war. To the Gulf states, this was terrifying. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and others did not want their cities turned into target boards. But geography does not ask permission. The Gulf had hosted bases, ports, aircraft, radar, money, fuel, and logistics. So when Iran answered, the whole region felt the answer. A local war became a regional war. People asked, why the UAE? Why Dubai? Why ports? Why hotels? Why shipping? Because the UAE is not just a country with tall buildings. It is a hub. A hub for money, a hub for airports, a hub for shipping, a hub for energy, a hub for U.S. military and commercial connections. Iran's strategy was not only to punch the soldier. It was to shake the table the soldier was standing on. That does not make attacks on civilian places lawful or moral. It explains the strategy. Iran wanted to say, if our cities are unsafe, your rich glass cities will also feel unsafe. And that is the horror of escalation. Everyone starts by saying they're attacking power. Then civilians pay. Saudi Arabia stood in a dangerous place. It is a U.S. partner. It is Iran's regional rival. It is one of the most important oil states in the world, but it also knows what missiles and drones can do to oil facilities. So Saudi Arabia's nightmare was simply, if the war grows, oil burns. If oil burns, prices rise. If prices rise, the whole world shouts. And if the whole world shouts, the Gulf becomes the center of blame. Saudi Arabia wanted Iran contained, but not a burning Gulf. It wanted U.S. protection, but not endless regional war. It wanted power, but also stability. In this story, Saudi Arabia was like a king sitting on an oil barrel during a thunderstorm. Now we need to fix one confusion. In this specific Iran war, the direct connected front was Lebanon, not Libya. Libya belongs to the older story of Western intervention. NATO bombing, regime change, collapse, and the lesson many countries learned from it. But Lebanon was the live battlefield tied to Iran through Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Iran's strongest ally on Israel's northern border. So when Iran was attacked, Hezbollah became part of the pressure system. Israel then struck Lebanon hard, saying it was targeting Hezbollah. But again, wars do not land only on fighters. They land on bridges, roads, villages, families, and refugees. Lebanon became another place where ordinary people paid for decisions made by armed men. Iraq was not just another country on the map. Iraq was the ghost standing behind the whole story. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq destroyed a state, unleashed years of violence, and changed the regional balance. Before that invasion, Saddam Hussein's Iraq was one of Iran's biggest enemies. After the invasion, Iraq became a place where Iranian influence could grow. So when people ask, how did Iran become so powerful in the region? Part of the answer is Iraq. The US broke one wall and Iran walked through the opening. This is the irony. A war sold as making the region safer helped create the conditions for more wars later. The past did not stay buried. It became strategy. Libya was not the same war. But Libya mattered as a warning. Muammar Gaddafi gave up Libya's weapons program years before NATO intervention. Later, Libya was bombed, the government collapsed, and Gaddafi was killed. To many governments watching from outside, the lesson was brutal. If you give up your deterrence, powerful countries may still come for you. This does not make Gaddafi good. It does not make Iran's rulers innocent. But it explains why states under threat cling to missiles, nuclear programs, and armed allies. The US and its allies often say, "Disarm and trust us." But Iraq and Libya made that sentence sound very different to countries like Iran and North Korea. To them, it sounded like, "Disarm first. Maybe survive later." Then the war moved to the water. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow sea passage. But this tiny door carries a huge amount of the world's oil. Iran knew this. The US knew this. China knew this. India knew this. Saudi Arabia and the UAE knew this. Everyone knew this. So when the Gulf became unsafe, the world economy became nervous. Ships slowed down. Insurance became expensive. Oil prices jumped. Gas prices scared governments. Airlines worried. Factories worried. Families worried. This is why a missile near Iran can become a fuel bill in India. Modern war travels through oil. It enters your car. It enters your electricity. It enters your food prices. India did not need to fire missiles to be dragged into the war. India imports huge amounts of energy. Its ships move through dangerous waters. Its workers live across the Gulf. Its economy feels oil shocks quickly. So when the Gulf shook, India had to react. It looked for different oil sources. It worried about sailors. It worried about fuel prices. It worried about millions of Indians working in Gulf countries. India's position was not simple. It did not want to become America's soldier. It did not want to become Iran's enemy. It did not want oil chaos. So India tried to balance protect trade, protect citizens, protect energy, and avoid being trapped in someone else's war. That is how great power conflict hits countries that never asked to join. China watched the war with two eyes. One eye was on oil. The other eye was on power. China buys energy from the region. It does not want the Gulf burning. China also wants to show that the US is not the only country that can shape world politics. So China condemned escalation, supported diplomacy, and worked with Pakistan on peace efforts. But China did not jump into the battlefield. It used statements, meetings, pressure, and mediation. This is how big powers often act. They do not always fight with tanks. Sometimes they fight with trade routes, oil contracts, diplomatic language, and waiting. China's message was stop the fire, reopen the sea, and do not let Washington own the whole story. Pakistan became important because it was close enough to fear the fire and connected enough to talk. Pakistan shares a border with Iran. It has ties with China. It has relations with Gulf countries. It has channels with the United States. So Pakistan tried to become a bridge. Not because it was the strongest country in the war, but because sometimes the useful person is the one who can talk to more than one angry room. Pakistan feared spillover refugees, sectarian tension, border instability, energy prices, and regional chaos. So its role was mediation. It tried to help turn missiles into meetings. And in a war where everyone wanted to look strong, even getting people to sit at a table became a form of power. North Korea watched carefully. It did not need to send armies to understand the lesson. It saw Iran attacked. It saw Iraq's old ghost. It saw Libya's old warning. And it likely thought, this is why we never give up nuclear weapons. North Korea's message to itself was simple. If you are weak, they bomb you. If you are dangerous enough, they negotiate. That is a terrifying lesson for the world. Because every war that punishes a country suspected of wanting nuclear weapons can make another country want nuclear weapons even more. The US and Israel may have wanted to stop one nuclear danger, but the message received elsewhere may have been the opposite. In North Korea, the notebook probably said, "Never disarm." Eventually, the war became too expensive for everyone. Iran was damaged, but not erased. Israel had struck hard, but still faced danger from Lebanon and missiles. The US had shown power, but now had oil disruption, regional anger, military risk, and political pressure. The Gulf wanted the fire away from its ports and towers. India wanted energy stability. China wanted shipping stability. Pakistan wanted regional stability. Lebanon wanted the bombing to stop. Ordinary people everywhere wanted food, fuel, sleep, and safety. This is the part leaders hate to admit. Sometimes wars do not end because someone becomes kind. They end because the bill becomes too high. The dead are buried, the wounded remain, and the politicians call it strategy. By June 2026, the US and Iran moved toward a framework to stop the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But this was not a happy ending. It was a pause. The nuclear issue remained. The missile issue remained. Lebanon remained. Israel was angry about parts of the deal. Iran wanted sanctions relief, guarantees, and an end to attacks on its allies. The Gulf wanted shipping safe again. The world wanted oil moving again. So, the story ends not with peace, but with a question. After all the bombs, all the speeches, all the dead civilians, all the burned oil, all the broken bridges, what was actually solved? The fire was paused. The map was scarred. And the children were still asking the same question. Why did the sky fall on us? This was not a clean war of heroes and villains. It was a story of powerful states using fear as permission, civilians paying the price, old wars creating new wars, and small places on the map becoming the center of the world. And if there is one lesson, it is this. When leaders say the next bomb will bring safety, always ask who will be standing underneath it.